Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for attending this important forum for candidates who are running for the Rock County Sheriff's Office. We'd like to thank the candidates for coming this evening and for running for this office. The forum is being sponsored by the NAACP, JOB, which is Justice Without Borders, Overcoming Borders, the League of Women Voters of Beloit, and the League of Women Voters of Janesville. My name is Gail Hotchkiss. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Beloit, and I will be the moderator for the forum. The League of Women Voters has a basic purpose of making democracy work for all citizens. The League is nonpartisan and neither supports or opposes candidates for office at any level of government. The League works to influence policy through advocacy. I would like to ask everyone if they could please make sure that their cell phones are off and that only members of the media may take pictures. Our format for the forum is that we will start with the candidate introductions, followed by questions prepared by the co-sponsors and questions from the audience, and then closing remarks. In preparation for the audience, which is wonderful to see this room full, is when it's time for the questions from the audience, the topics should be limited to issues that relate to the Sheriff's Office, and questions be short and concise, as the candidates have a limited response time. Questions should be written clearly on cards and collected by assigned persons. So we have cards out in the, on the back table, and there will be people walking around with them, and would like you to write those questions on the cards and turn them in, and we'll then go through the questions. Candidates, I'd ask you to please attention to the timekeeper, Joyce Metter, who's right there down front, who will give you a 30-second warning and when your time is ending, and then stop when you're out of time. All right, so we will start this evening with introductions, and I'm going to be rotating people who are doing things first, but we're going to start with Gary Garelli, who will be first to do the introduction.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Gary Garelli. I have over 36 years of experience at the Rock County Sheriff's Office. In addition to that, I've been a community member for the last 40 years. And as a community member, I've been very active in various categories, particularly in the Milton areas where I am from. I believe I'm both a leader at the Sheriff's Department and within the community, and I think that's very important as we move forward and try and work together throughout the community with different organizations throughout Rock County. Educational-wise, I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in criminal justice. I also attended the National FBI Academy in 2009, and I've worked in just about every area of the Sheriff's Office as well. I did run for sheriff in 2014, and at that time, the #1 issue on my platform, was to fight the opioid and heroin problem that we had and could see coming. And obviously that's exploded in the last 4 years, so that's a top priority. Another item is to accreditate the Sheriff's Office, and I'll get into that more later. Criminal justice reform is a top priority for me as well, as is converting the Sheriff's Office to a unified leadership style, which includes servant leadership style to your employees at the first level, and then as it works down through everybody to eventually it comes to citizens of Rock County as the deputies work with you individually. I'm also going to be a very, I'm going to watch the tax, be a steward of good tax dollars to make sure that our money is spent appropriately through the county board and resources that we need. Thank you.
Next, we'll have an introduction by Troy Knutson.
Good evening, and thank you so much for hosting this event here. I think the Sheriff of Rock County is a very important position. It has a big impact on our community. Certainly, it has the ability to impact people's lives, particularly those people who are in dire need of assistance, and working together, we can really make a difference in our community. And so I think it's really important that we have an opportunity to have a forum like this where we can discuss some of the issues that face our community so that we can move forward, make the best choice as far as candidates. Name is Troy Knutson. I'm a commander at the Sheriff's Office. That's basically the third highest ranking position at the Sheriff's Office. I'm in charge of about half of the agency. Through the years, I've been in charge of both law enforcement services and correctional services. So effectively, I have had experience in leading the entire Sheriff's Office there. I have lived in Rock County for my whole life, basically. My family has lived in Rock County for generations, so I am very solidly connected here to our community and really have a strong interest in having the best impact for the people who live here. I'm married. My wife is out here. We celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary this last fall. I have two boys who are 21 and 19 years old, and both of them are in college. Generally, I am very pleased with the way the Sheriff's Office is operating. I've been a part of the leadership there at the Sheriff's Office for quite some time, and I think we've made some very strong gains in many different areas that have improved our agency and improved our connection with the community. But I really think that we need to focus more on some of the social issues that are driving our incarceration rate and our crime rate in the community. Issues like mental illness, poverty, the issues with minority community. We really have to come together and address these issues going forward, and that's the reason that I'm running for sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Jude Mauer.
Good evening. Again, my name is Jude Mauer. I started my law enforcement career in 1990 as a senior in high school by enlisting in the Wisconsin Army National Guard's 32nd Military Police Company. During my 6-year enlistment, I attained the rank of corporal and received the National Defense Medal. I graduated from Madison Area Technical College in 1994 with an associate's degree in police science. Shortly thereafter, I graduated from Madison Area Technical College's Police Academy and began working part-time for the villages of Albany and Monticello. In May 1995, I was hired full-time as a deputy sheriff with the Rock County Sheriff's Office. In 1996, I married my beautiful wife, Michelle, and together we have raised 3 sons, ages 16, 19, and 20. Our 19-year-old son currently serves in the United States Marine Corps as a geographic intelligence specialist. My community volunteer duties include member of the City of Janesville Citizen Board of Review, member of the Salvation Army Advisory Board and Finance Committee, and catechist for St. Mary Parish in Milton. Since 1995, I have been promoted 3 times and received 2 commendation awards for leadership during critical incidents. I have served as jail and patrol sergeant, lieutenant of support services, and my current position is captain of the Patrol Bureau. I served as grievance officer and president for the Rock County Sheriff's Office Supervisors Union for nearly 7 years. While working full-time and raising 3 sons, I returned to school and earned a bachelor's degree in public administration and a master's degree in management, and graduated from Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. As sheriff, I will remain on the front lines and pledge ethical, transparent, honest, and principled leadership. No politics, no entitlements, no controversies. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to go into the part of the forum that will have questions that the co-sponsors have made to ask the candidates. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the questions, and they'll be directed at each candidate, and the other 2 that aren't answering the question may give a 1-minute response if they would like to whatever the question is about. So we're going to go with Mr. Knutson, who gets the first question. In your opinion, what is the best way to serve youth who are caught up in the criminal justice system, including the youth who are in the county's juvenile detention facility?
We'll get the hang of this. The youth of our community are a critical issue that we have to address in this criminal justice system. The youth, if we can catch them early enough as they start down the wrong path and get them on the right path, we can avoid some of the issues with our adult correction system. Since I started in law enforcement approximately 30 years ago, we have seen our incarceration rate double here in Rock County. I think by not having enough attention to problems as they're developing, it's continuing to grow our jail population, our prison population. So I think what we need to do with youth services is to work very much. I think the format that we have used in some of our specialty courts has been outstanding, where we bring in people from, in those cases, the judges, the prosecution, the defense, counselors, law enforcement. Everybody comes together and addresses the problems of alcohol, drugs, and veterans court. We could use something similar to that to deal with some of the issues with the juveniles. We've largely left things to probation and parole, juvenile probation, and I really think that we need to enlist the help and the assistance of so many of these other areas to affect that change and to get people on that right track.
Mr. Maurer, would you like to respond to that?
Currently, the Sheriff's Office has over 10 community-based programs and events, and many of those are specifically targeted for the Rock County youth. National Night Out, for example. Obviously, parents, families, they come to that event. Unfortunately, this year, for reasons that are unbeknownst to me, we did not have National Night Out. But as Sheriff, National Night Out will return back to the Sheriff's Office, and we will go back out to our communities and host that event. But in addition to National Night Out, the Sheriff's Office, we have Coffee with a Cop, which primarily is more of an audience with the adults. We have Boys and Girls Club badges for baseball, Janesville Mobilizing for Change, Cops and Kids Foundation, Shop with a Cop, Police Explorers Post for Rock County youth. We go to colleges, we recruit at the local levels as well. And also our hunter and boater safety education courses. It's a great opportunity for our staff to get involved with the youth and show them that law enforcement is more than just wearing a badge and a gun, driving around in a squad and making traffic stops or making arrests. We are real people and we live within the community, and we are here to help our youth in any means possible. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli?
Could you repeat the question
Sure.
again, please?
In your opinion, what is the best way to serve youth who are caught up in the criminal justice system, including the youth who are in the county's juvenile detention facility?
With any juvenile or even the incarceration rate that we have currently in jail, it's imperative that we work with the youth at a very young age. And that can start as early as K through 12. I would work with the community school districts closely to do what I can to assist in educating the youth, to provide programs for them, to assist them in any manner that we can to keep them out of those sensitive areas which would land them in jail. And unfortunately, that can be a cycle that doesn't stop. Once you're incarcerated, to come back out of that and re-enter into the community, it's very difficult. So I think it's imperative that we start at a very young age and connect with the school districts, connect with the kids, be friends to the kids, not just enforcers all the time, and be a part of their life so it's second nature for them and they understand our mission in life as well as our mission in the community to help them as well.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Maurer, you'll be the first one to address this question. Recidivism is a problem in the criminal justice system. There are programs for inmates that help them successfully transition into society and therefore ensure public safety. What educational and rehabilitation services does the Rock County Jail provide?
The one difficult question with recidivism is the definition. Some believe that the definition is that the person being released does not come back into incarceration, or that the length of time that the person may return is a factor or a win in recidivism. But at the Sheriff's Office, we've taken a very strong approach to it in terms of the recap program, which I believe is now in its 25th or 26th year. And that allows the inmates that are possibly en route to having to go to prison are given a 5-month program to focus on drug and alcohol treatment. And that program is sponsored by the Department of Corrections as well as through Beloit Technical College in terms of their teachers. And what that program does, at least on a yearly basis, is anywhere from 40 to 50 inmates are allowed to complete this program successfully, and that keeps them out of prison, as well as potentially coming back to the Rock County Sheriff's Office. And in addition to the normal 40 to 50 people that complete successfully the program, we're looking at about another 120 that also receive the same type of benefit from the program in the way that it's run. In addition, we've got the Canine Corrections Academy, which is obviously a partnership with the Humane Society of Southern Wisconsin for stray and abandoned dogs to be adoptable again, and that's been a success too within the Sheriff's Office. The Recap Garden program is obviously maintained by volunteers with the Recap participants, and that produce from that is given back to the community. So that's another way that we are helping in terms of teaching life skills to those that are unfortunately incarcerated in our jail. And lastly, drug court has been a great success as well, and that's been since 2007, and that is also a cooperation between the Sheriff's Office, our courts, and our Public Defender's Office. And in that program, the inmates have a 12-month period in order to complete that. Let me take that back. They're not inmates, they're avoiding incarceration, so it's an alternative so that they do not have to stay time in the Rock County Jail. And that has been a successful program too. So all those things the Sheriff's Office has been doing for many years, especially with the Recap program, and that is, again, 25 to 26 years, and those programs will stay in place as a sheriff. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli, if you would like to respond to that.
Thank you. Those are very good points. I agree the Recap program is an excellent program that has been very successful through the Sheriff's Office and for the individuals that have participated in it. Drug court has done wonderful things too. I'd like to think that we can do a much better job though and improve and enhance those conditions. Right now we have very limited exit strategies for individuals that are in jail and when they leave. And a lot of those individuals do need more treatment for mental illness. They need to be taught some different skills, some additional skills to help them when they resurface in the community, and we can do a much better job. I met recently with a program in Beloit, and the community members of this community should be very proud that there are many people and organizations that are willing to help and reach out and provide services to our individuals in the jail, and we have to find a way to connect everybody and bring partnerships together so we can all be successful. And I think that's one of my biggest strengths. I know it is, in collaboration with people and criminal justice partners to work up everybody to the benefit of each other.
Mr. Knutson, would you like to respond?
Sure. As a jail commander, one of the first things I did when I was reassigned to the jail was to go down there and to meet with the different people who are doing the training for the inmates down there, Thinking for Change. Part of that Recap program, we also teach job training. We teach English and math skills, and it was really good to touch base with them and get an understanding as to what it is that we're hoping to accomplish. I think it's been touched on briefly, but I think it's a really important point that when people are released from the jail, sometimes they have very poor resources. So a few years ago, were able to implement a reentry specialist job. I went down there and touched base with that specialist, and they are horrifically overworked. The caseload that they're trying to manage is far in excess of the resources that they have available. When a person is released from jail, they often have to navigate a wide variety of different issues, such as medications, getting back on insurance, dealing with doctors, finding a job, finding a place to live, and this reentry specialist has been able to help with that. This next year in the budget, I've put in for a second position there, a .8 job to help navigate some of those issues and to be able to treat other people. Additionally, we've also put in for a mental health counselor to go from a 24-hour-a-week position to a 40-hour position. I think that's going to help significantly down in the jail.
Thank you. Our third question, Mr. Garelli will respond first. Some people go to jail because they cannot pay their fines that they owe. This can have a negative effect on family and work opportunities. As sheriff, do you have any recommendations, and what are you willing to do to help rectify the disparity between those able to pay fines and those unable to pay?
Well, right now I think it's a well-known fact that mass incarceration rates have confused or bogged down our system. The incarceration rate for individuals of color is extremely high. I'm aware of that, and I'm willing to work with the community and correction systems to lower those rates. For incarceration rates or individuals in those areas, I'd like to decriminalize some of the lower offenses for drugs use, and provide opportunities for those individuals to get out into the community back where they came from, and maintain their jobs, maintain their work schedules, and not lose anything that they have as they come into the jail system. We need to do a better job of lowering our incarceration rates and make individuals have opportunities for individuals outside the jail to better suit their families and structures in life.
Mr. Knutson?
Sure. At the beginning of this year, we made a change out at the sheriff's office, and it was in conjunction with the judicial system. It used to be that people would work off their fines at $50 a day. We have now changed that where it's $75 a day. So it allows them to work off their sentences or sit their time off quicker than what they have in the past. And I think that's going to reduce the amount of time people spend in the jail. It'll reduce the amount of weight on the system there. But additionally, I think it's worth mentioning, a few years ago we were looking at a $56 million expansion to our jail facility. And I was part of the transition team that was supposed to develop that new jail. And instead what we were able to do is identify some alternatives to that incarceration. One of them was the diversion program, which was the ankle bracelet program, and we've been using that extensively, I believe, with low-level offenders who are able to sit their time in their own homes out in the community and continue to stay in touch with their support system and continue to work their jobs. The other thing that I think was a critical improvement was the work enders program, where instead of somebody coming in and sitting off their time, they come in and they earn time off of their sentence by working each day.
Mr. Maurer?
The electronic monitoring program as well as the work ender program have been very successful in terms of saving you, the taxpayers, considerable amount of money, as well as staving off a considerable price tag on a jail expansion. Just for example, on the electronic monitoring, we're looking at about a $1 million per year in savings in terms of jail bed space. The work ender program, on average, we're looking anywhere from $170,000 to $180,000 that we're being able to, they're working off on their fines. You know, you're open to sending some of these things to collections, but by any means, you do not want the Rock County Sheriff's Office and its jail to become a debtor's prison, and I think we've taken significant steps to do that. But as we move forward, there might be other ways that we could do that as well. Collections could be one possibility, but more importantly, we need to stay in touch and on top of what the programs we currently have, because they've already proven successful. Thank you.
Okay, I might shake this up a little bit, but I don't think I'm thinking this in the same right order. So, Mr. Knutson, this will be for you. There's a fear among the Latino community about being separated from their families because of deportation and unjust arrests. How will you develop and implement policies that ensure that they will be treated fairly and that trust will be built among community members?
This is certainly a very serious concern, a very serious situation for people in that Latino community that are dealing with these issues. You know, I think throughout my career, fairness and justice and doing the right thing at the right time have been principles that have guided what it is that I do. I don't have to think too terribly far back in my family history to where my family would have been immigrants coming from another country, and to imagine having to deal with some of the difficulties that they're having to deal with right now is very difficult for me. As far as how we interact and deal with some of the issues regarding deportation, you know, there are certain people who come into the community who pose a serious threat, violent criminals who are in our community and have to be removed, and those, if ICE or somebody was in need of assistance, we help other agencies who are officers are at risk. We also have to deal with people who have holds placed on them at the jail, but generally we have not participated in any of the sweeps that we have seen in other areas of people whose only violation is not having proper status, and I don't see that policy changing in the future. Certainly my heart goes out to many in that community, and I will work to establish close ties and connections with that community to make sure that they're treated fairly and justly and the way I would want my family to be treated if they found themselves in this situation.
Thank you. Mr. Maurer?
We will continue with the same policy that we've operated under for many years. We'll continue to serve our community members regardless of race or national origin in a manner which they feel safe in reaching out to us for help. If overwhelming evidence exists a member of our community illegally entered the United States in violation of federal criminal law or violation of federal civil law for having stayed beyond the legal period of time, we will notify authorities. We will not detain in any member of our community unless federal authorities request a hold. Likewise, incarcerated persons will not be held simply for immigration violations unless federal authorities place a hold and make arrangements for practical transfer. This policy has been in place for many years, and I don't believe we've had any incidents like we've had across the nation in terms of a national policy. So we'll continue to do what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garelli?
We do have policies at the Sheriff's Office that dictate our process for handling these situations. And again, unless there's a serious offense with an immigrant, a federal violation that we're being told to be held, this individual, then we'll do that. We're not a department that's going to go out and knock on doors and looking for individuals to bring those in because they're immigrants or may not have the status that is required. Again, I think the most important aspect of this is building relationships again before you get to this point and building those partnerships in the community. I served on a Latino Community coalition for several years and built those relationships, and when situations like these arise, we can sit down and talk about those. We have familiar faces, and we can we move forward. I'm also very excited that if elected, I'm going to develop a minority council which will include people of color and minorities in the community, have leaders in the community that will sit on that of color and of Latino nationality, and together we'll work on a quarterly basis to talk about items and issues within the community, so before they happen, we're well prepared or can see those coming and head those off. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have two more questions to ask, but I just want to remind the audience that they can ask, when we get to the portion of the thing that is for the audience participation, that there are people around who have cards, and that they can collect them as we go along. But I just want to remind everybody now so that I'm not sitting up here waiting for questions when we get around to it. So. All right, Mr. Maurer, this question is for you. Conditions at county jails can vary widely. What will you commit to improve living conditions at the Rock County Jail that will be for humane treatment of inmates?
Well, obviously there's state law that governs the operation of a jail and regulations therein. So there's very specific expectations. And just walking through the jail yesterday again, the conditions that I saw yesterday are dramatically improved from the last time that I was assigned to the jail, and that was from 2000 to 2005 when our inmate population was nearly 600 and we had inmates sleeping on the floor. We also had inmates that were in the booking room that needed obviously mental health services, and at that time our services were extremely weak, not like they are today. We've come a long ways in being able to accommodate the inmate population by having diversion programs that we've already talked about and discussed, and the money that it's saved. We've also taken strides that other agencies or jails throughout the Wisconsin have not, including PREA, which is the Prison Rape and Elimination Act. It wasn't mandatory for us to get involved, but we took strides to do so, and we continue to make those same strides. So our endeavor in terms of providing a humane place is not only according to statute, but it's also in accordance with just human dignity. And I believe that we've been doing a fine job of that, and we can always look forward to making improvements, and as those improvements are suggested and come forward, it's obviously something that we will take into consideration and we can implement. But as of right now, I believe the conditions that we have for the inmates are well within the standards set by law, as well as what the taxpayer standards are as well. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli?
Everybody in the community, whether they're incarcerated or not, needs to be treated fairly and equitably and provided the best health care, affordable health care that we can give them, either while they're in jail or outside of jail. In talking to several community members recently, a lot of concerns that they have and wanted to voice is that visitation times are too limited. They're over a phone or through a system electronically. They're not face to face, and some of that can't be prevented. I'd like to think that we can do a better job and provide more time for them. Another concern was for the inmates to have some type of recreation activity. Currently, we do not have that opportunity. I would like to look into that and expand a recreation yard, possibly, that we can provide that to them on a weekly basis, and also look at lowering some of the costs. The concerns for phone calls and some of the food services they buy has been mentioned. It's been extremely high and not cost effective for them. So again, we need to be fair to everybody, even those incarcerated in jail, to benefit everybody that is involved.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson?
I'll try to keep this to a minute here. Since I was reassigned to Correctional Services at the beginning of the year, we've made a number of adjustments to the way the jail is run, hopefully to improve inmate conditions. One of the first things that you may have heard about was our inmate book drive. At the time I got in there, our book carts were woefully empty or not stacked with sort of books that you would want inmates to have access to in order to rehabilitate themselves or use their time in a profitable manner. I think we got it, at the time I shut down the book drive, at least 1,700 books that way, quality books that the inmates are now able to use. We looked at the release time. Inmates had been getting woken up, I don't know, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, released at 3 o'clock. We felt that that was unreasonable. We changed that release time now where they get woke up at 5 and they're out the door by 7. We brought in eye masks and earplugs for inmates for night. It's bright in there because of the security lights. The doors, when they close with quite a bang. So adding those hopefully improves conditions slightly for them. We, like I said, are increasing our mental health capacity down there. We're going to increase our reentry resources. We've worked with our chaplaincy groups, NA and AA, to try and increase the availability. And I am part of the program looking at our facilities, and I asked them to give me, as they're reviewing improvements that can be made at the facilities, information on what a new rec yard would cost so we can evaluate that going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Maurer? Did you start that question? Thank you. All right. Mr. Garelli, get this question then. There is racial disparity throughout our state in the criminal justice system. What training will you provide your staff to assure that they are culturally competent and able to communicate with people of color and those with mental difficulties so as to prevent unjustified treatment and/or arrests?
It certainly is a concern in our community, not just in ours, but across the country. Again, I think it's imperative with the partnerships that we have within those communities that we utilize them. I've been in contact with several individuals that teach and work in diversifying individuals, and I've already indicated that we will bring those individuals in for training on a yearly basis to help educate our staff, and mental health issues as well. With NOMNI, we have several deputies that are currently trained in that area. I'd like to expand that and provide everybody on the shift an opportunity to learn in that capacity. They're more familiar with mental health issues, mental illness. And I'd also like to explore the possibility with the crisis unit in Rock County that when we have a complaint of mental illness in the community that our deputies are responding to, that a crisis worker, an individual more qualified in that area can respond with us, and once that situation is under control per se, that they're on scene and they can talk to this individual and helpfully divert that individual, whether they were headed for jail for whatever incident that had occurred, or to ease them in another direction with more resources that they have or know of to help that individual and prevent an entry into jail for somebody that does not need to be there or should be there.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson?
The Sheriff's Office staff just finished a round of diversity training. We brought in a local expert here to discuss some of the issues that we have in connecting with our minority community, in working with inmates who may be of a different race than what the staff is. I think that's very quality training. It's time well spent. I think we need to expand on that. I think that it can only be the first step of what we need to do in order to improve our connections with minorities and the way we interact and the impact that we hope to have on people while they're in the jail. I think another part that you discussed there was the interaction with those who are mentally ill. And we have found that that interaction has to be significantly different than what it is with someone who isn't dealing with mental health issues. As a result, back in 2005, I was introduced to the Crisis Intervention Training Program. At that time, I was very interested in bringing it here to Rock County. However, the funds weren't available. A few years later, they did become available through a grant. I wrote the grant in conjunction with Elizabeth Pullman McQuillan, and we were able to bring that program here to Rock County. In addition to bringing the training here, we had to also implement the whole program. We had to connect with local treatment providers and then let them present the training to the officers, so that when an issue arises, we're able to connect with local experts and get the help that we need in order to address those problems. Certainly, mental illness has been a big issue, and that training is a nice first step, but I also think that other things are going to need to be done in order to improve the situation there. I would consider a mental health treatment court along the same lines as our drug court or our alcohol court or the veterans courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maurer?
Through Lexipol, which is the company that we have for our policies and procedures, is a very defensible policy in terms of the bias-based policing. And that policy obviously is given to our deputies, and they are trained in that. And one of the things that our supervisors do out in the field is that they review the interactions that the deputies will have with the citizens. And obviously, if there's any abnormalities in terms of whether one deputy is stopping too many African Americans or Latinos, obviously that's something that can be documented, and within the policy then there's obviously actions that can be taken. In addition to just having a defensible policy, we are pleased to be welcoming at some point very soon here, as Rock County, we're going to be accepted as Phase 5 of the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Initiative. And what that is really, it enables law enforcement officials to enforce laws more equally, objectively, and without discriminating toward any individual or group. Incarcerating those who are a danger to our community while providing diversion or deferred prosecution programs to those identified as not being a danger to our community will reduce victimization and unnecessary incarceration. And the initiative, through training and services outside of the criminal justice system, will provide enhanced outcomes for individuals living with mental illness. And within that same evidence-based initiative, there will also be flags, and those flags will identify individuals that law enforcement is about to make contact with as having a mental illness, so that the encounter is not something outside of where we want it to go. Thank you.
Thank you. We've gotten through those questions, and now we have questions from the audience, and thank you very much for some very good questions that are coming forward here. I'm going to try to combine a couple, so give me a little leeway here. We are fortunate in Rock County to have 3 very qualified candidates for sheriff. And you do share some similar views on some subjects. What makes you the best candidate and that we should vote for you? You first. Yes, correct.
Thank you. I think one of the bigger differences between myself and my two competitors here is I hold the rank of commander, which is the third highest level at the sheriff's office. Each of my competitors are captains. Commander is in charge of half of the agency, which is 3 captains and 3 bureaus. In my case, I also get emergency management. In addition to having a wider span of control, I also see the sheriff's office from a slightly different perspective there. I have had the opportunity to work on both sides of the house, both corrections and law enforcement services, so I have effectively had control over the entire agency. In addition, our responsibilities are different. I end up dealing with some of the budgetary issues. Our budget at the sheriff's office is about $22 million. This is not a small operation. I think sometimes people look at who they might want for the next sheriff as to who would be the nicest guy to get a ticket from, but we are operating a major operation there. We have to think about liability management, we have to think about policies, we have to think about programs that we're developing. All of these things fall under my role as a commander at the sheriff's office. In addition, when we deal with the most serious situations, I typically am looked upon to take a leadership role there. When you think of the Jack Gabowski case from last year, I was in the position where I did the public information officer, which was a key role. Certainly that was critical with that particular case because it garnered national attention, and we ended up dealing with media across the country. When you go back a little bit further, you may remember the Powell investigation down here in Beloit Township, where a 4-day-old child was kidnapped from their home and ended up being found in a plastic tote outside of a gas station in the middle of winter. When that case came together, we had agencies from across the country that came here to help us. We had a huge number of investigators. It was certainly a difficult case to try and manage, and I ended up being the incident commander on that case. So I had to run it. I think as you're looking for who should be the next sheriff, you should look to somebody who has broad experience in a wide variety of different areas so that they can lead this agency going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer.
I just want to share just one expert from my most recent employee performance evaluation, which was dated December 12th of 2017. Just one portion of it is listed as Mauer's ability and leadership approach have been incredible assets that have had a huge impact on this agency and our community. The unbiased author and rater for that evaluation was Troy Knutson. The reason I'm running for sheriff is that it's time for the sheriff's office to stop with the politics. It's unfortunate that we have to choose a political party, and I chose the Republican Party to run because I chose to run late. And those that I talked to that are in politics said, Jude, if you run as a Democrat, you're going to be the third wheel, and you and the other person that chose to run for the first time are going to split the votes, and it's going to go to the person that ran all previously. So that is why I chose to run as a Republican. Not because that's my political leaning or my beliefs, but because that's what I had to do. Further, I have no desire to be a career sheriff. It's time that we no longer have career sheriffs. If I'm elected, I will definitely do 4 years. Maybe one more, that's it. I'm out the door, and my beautiful wife and I will be on some beach somewhere. So for those reasons, that is why I am running for sheriff. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli.
Thank you. I've been fortunate to have been part of this county for 40 years, as I mentioned earlier, the last 36 and a half as a member of the sheriff's office, as a captain. I too have been involved in many incidents within the sheriff's office. I was instrumental in the conversion of the emergency management program in 2012, where I was selected primarily by the sheriff because of my ability to collaborate and bring people together. It was a very intense time in the county. That program had been delivered to the sheriff's office. It used to stand alone, and it involved bringing all the partners together, from fire to EMS to law enforcement, together under one roof. And myself, along with Sergeant Sheena Kohler were a part of that, and it went very well. I'm very well respected in the community. My ability to collaborate and bring people together with the partnerships that I built over these 36 years it can't be measured. Very well respected, and looking forward to combining those abilities to team up with community members in the future to make Rock County better for everybody.
Thank you. Okay. I'm trying to, again, combine two. As a sheriff, how would you bring together the law enforcement agencies in Rock County? And also, how would you handle duplicate services between these agencies? If I could expand that a little bit, not only the law enforcement part of the Rock County, but just the communities also, the communities and the law enforcement in Rock County. Mr. Maurer, you have this question.
Well, when elected sheriff, I will personally visit with all the Rock County law enforcement leaders to ensure that our cooperative spirit remains alive with an eye towards combining repetitive resources. And what repetitive resources could I be referencing? We have 3 SWAT teams in Rock County. It's been talked about, but nothing's been done for many years in terms of combining those 3 teams into one. Well, why is that a benefit to you? As the taxpayers, it's very costly to supply and outfit 3 SWAT teams in Rock County that have the same mission, responding to critical incidences with higher training than what normal deputies have received while they're on patrol. If we can do that, that's going to save you, the taxpayers, money. But what's the hindrance? What's the problem? The problem is the power play. And as sheriff, I'm not worried about the power play. If somebody wants to be in charge of the SWAT team so that we can save you, the taxpayers, money while still providing that same service, I'm all for it. So that is one thing that I would like to move forward towards. We can look to the north for Dane County, and they have a training consortium. And what that means is that they have members throughout all their agencies in Dane County report to one area for their training, whether it's firearms or DAT, EVOC. And here in Rock, each of our agencies have their own trainers. There are a few things that we do together, but we could do much more if we combine those resources as well. So again, in terms of the power play as sheriff, I'll reach out and I'll open that up, and if we can get that done, that's going to be even more savings to you. If it can't be done, it's not going to be because of me as sheriff. It's going to be because somebody else within our law enforcement system doesn't want to give up a potential power. But if we combine our resources, and if I can be the person to lead that, absolutely, I will do it, and it's a win for you, and it's going to be a win for everybody here in Rock County. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli?
Again, my ability has been proven over the 36 years, again, to work with individuals within the community, criminal justice partners. I urge individuals that when they go to vote, before they vote, I think it's important that everybody's here tonight to be informed, to ask any other criminal justice partners, whether they're law enforcement or juvenile justice, about the 3 candidates and get their opinion on those. I've already released a press release early in my campaign about National Night Out. I met with Chief Moore, and if elected, we're going to do National Night Out together. That's never been done before. So we're going to break some ice there. Again, that shows my ability to work with people, and for whatever reason it hasn't happened in the past, but I'm willing to do that for the betterment of the departments and for the community, that we share resources and not duplicate services.
Mr. Knutson?
My career began in drug investigations, and it was a cooperative venture between Beloit and Janesville and Rock County. Other agencies were also allowed, but at that time those were the 3 that were involved in that unit. So my career started with collaboration with other agencies. I've had an opportunity to work on these skills again recently. Certainly, I was the president of the Rock County Law Enforcement Association a few years back. I have had that opportunity to work with with the other agencies through that, but also with that crisis intervention training that we brought to Rock County. Part of the reason that we got that grant is that it was a collaborative effort. If it would have been just the Rock County Sheriff's Office that was applying for it, I don't think we would have had the chance that I don't think we would have been successful in that endeavor. But luckily we were able to coordinate and work together towards applying for that and receive it. But as far as unity and collaboration here, I really think it comes into play when you think of the services that you provide for potential people who are violating the law, inmates who now want to go back into the community. I think our difficulty along the way has been too disjointed of services. We have to put them all together. Services before a person comes into jail, if they come into jail, connecting them with treatment. As they're walking out the door, they have to be connected with treatment on the outside so that we can move them through and get a better result than what we've been seeing in the past with our increasing incarceration rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is a long question, and I said don't make them long, but this is a long one, so, but an important one. And Mr. Garelli, you're going to get this one first. So, according to the last evaluation of the Rock County Drug Court, 66% of the African Americans who participated were Beloit residents, and 63% of the African Americans who were dropped from the program were from Beloit. If elected, will you support efforts to increase the treatment alternatives and diversion funding to fund improved transportation, video conferencing, court, or other methods to eliminate the disparate impact of the court on low-income and minority populations who live in Beloit?
Absolutely. I would look at all those possibilities. As I mentioned earlier, that I would, I'm planning on setting up a minority council with individuals of color and Latino from the community. Those individuals would be great resources for information as that and how they would like to further proceed, the benefits that would help the community of Beloit. And I would get that firsthand information. So I'm very open to all those possibilities. Obviously, it would take some in-depth studying to monitor all those and look at them, but if you have open communication with the partners in the community, all things are possible, and I would look at each and every one of those.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson?
Right now I'm currently working with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and that is a group of leaders in law enforcement and the criminal justice system to identify issues that are leading to things such as disproportionate confinement. In my past, I studied sociology. I also got part of my emphasis was research and analysis, statistics, that sort of thing. I think as we look at issues like this, we have to get good data. We have to bring it to people who are capable of really dissecting it so that they can identify exactly what the issues are, and then we can focus our effort and our energy on the issues that are the most significant problems. Certainly, we recognize some of the issues that, for instance, approximately 5% of our population right now is African American in the community, and in the jail, that percentage is probably closer to 35%. That is a big issue. I think now we have to break that problem down and find out exactly where the problem exists. If it exists in sentenced inmates, then you know perhaps there's a problem with sentencing. If it exists in the probation and parole, then maybe that's where we need to focus our efforts. I think it's probably going to show pre-confinement or before they've gone to bond, and that's exactly where we have to look at issues such as transportation, such as video court, from being able to make their appearance right from Beloit and not have to deal with some of the difficulty of getting up to the courthouse, which is up in Janesville. Thank you.
Mr. Maurer?
Well, obviously our drug court is not just with the sheriff's office. It's a cooperative effort with the DA's office, the Rock County Courts, Public Defender's Office, Human Services, and the Department of Corrections. It's a 12-month program, and it's one that's set to either reduce your charge or to have your charge taken out of the system if you're successful in terms of completing it. And in a 12-month program, if there's some variables here in terms of transportation, and that's obviously something that we collectively, in terms of the program designers, that's something we should address. The one thing we should address too, and society should address it, and you as the citizens should too, is that life is about choices and making proper choices, making mistakes and owning up to them. So if there's something that was more to the individual, I don't know if that's something we can help. But if it's something that we can identify, whether it's the transportation or whatever issue collectively that the drug court can identify, as sheriff, I'm all for making that change because we want to ensure people have success in the drug court and any other of our diversion programs. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Knutson gets this question first. Please describe one or two ways that state or federal policies negatively constrain Rock County criminal justice, and how would you advocate for change?
Right now, one of the most significant issues that is facing our criminal justice system, that's facing our community, is opioid addiction. And it is literally killing our citizens on way too regular of a basis. We have made some steps to improve that situation. We implemented the drug drop box. We implemented Narcan last year. We used Narcan nine times and we're successful in saving lives with that. However, we have a long ways still to go. One of the areas that we really need to focus on is treatment. And part of the treatment of getting into something like methadone is that you have to come in and you have to be clear of that drug before they can put anything in there. You can't have any other drug in your system either, such as marijuana. So when you find somebody who's willing to give up heroin, willing to give up that opiate, and they come in for that treatment, and because of the way the laws are structured, they can't get treatment because they still have marijuana in their system, it precludes their ability to get the treatment they need to deal with that opiate problem. And that is an example of the type of law that I think we need to address at the state level. Luckily, we have some wonderful legislators who are very concerned about these very issues, who are working very hard to make improvements. And I think that an improvement there, either at the federal or the state level, where we can get people into treatment without having to deal with that marijuana in their system issue, would make a big difference towards being able to help people in our community who are struggling with this very serious addiction to heroin and other opiates. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maurer?
Could you just repeat that question, please?
Oh, the long one?
The
No,
one you just
it wasn't, I know. Please describe one or two ways that state or federal policies negatively constrain Rock County criminal justice and how you would advocate for change.
Well, obviously, the sheriff's office, as the sheriff, we fall under the executive branch, so obviously we are enforcing the laws versus making the laws. But when those laws have a negative impact, it's critical for us to reach out to our local representatives in order to explain what that impact may be. You know, the heroin has been spoken about, and in terms of law enforcement, there are guidelines, obviously, that we work off. But in terms of having any type of restrictions that are prohibiting us from being able to provide adequate services to you as the community, I'm not aware of any. Now, once you get into the correction side of it, obviously there's differences, things that you can do, and programs that can be offered, and things from the federal government that could be offered. In a lot of cases for those grants, whether they're state grants, federal grants, a lot of times an agency our size just does not add up to what the requirements are in order to receive large-scale funding for certain initiatives that we may want to undertake. But in terms of it prohibiting us from being able to provide you the services, as your captain of the Patrol Bureau, the 3 shifts, 24-hour law enforcement services, there's nothing from the state or federal level that comes to mind in terms of that prohibiting our ability to provide your safety and security.
Mr. Garelli?
I had mentioned it earlier before, and our incarceration rate being very high in the jails and in prison, but particularly in the jail, which we're servicing now, and to, again, decriminalize some lower level offenses, especially the drug offenses. I pulled up a statistic the other day. And again, it concerns the people of color primarily, but people that are drug users as well. African Americans and whites use drug at the same rate, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. So in conjunction with that, I think if those lower levels or amounts of drugs, if we decriminalize those, we can get more individuals out of jail and not clog up the system, so to say.
Thank you. All right, let's get down to dollars and cents here. What experience do you have working with the Rock County Sheriff Department's budget? And Mr. Maurer, you get this question first.
Well, every year for the last 10 years as a captain, we've all put our time in terms of creating the budget and what we're adding to the budget. And obviously our budget is anywhere from 22 to 23 million, depending on which year. And what we do is we go to the sergeants, who in turn go to the deputies, and they submit the things that they need for their various programs, whether it's the animal control program, whether it's equipment for the squads, whether it's educational expenses that they intend to incur for that next year. And collectively we sit down and we put those things together, and then obviously we submit them. And then as a administrative team, we sit down and we figure out which one of those requests is something that we can fit into the budget. Because quite honestly, 19 million out of that 23 million goes just for personnel expenses, and that's your wages as well as your fringe benefits. So there's very little discretionary funds when you take into account the things that we need to purchase, whether it's squads or anything like that during the course of the next year, which could explain why it took many years for us to finally get a new truck and trailer for our SWAT team, which I talked about before in terms of combining repetitive resources. That was a big purchase for us, a capital purchase. So in terms of working the budget, we've all collectively worked the budget in terms of submitting it. And just the other day, we sat down with a portion of the county board, and we presented this year's budget to them, and we gave opportunities and explanations as to why we're making certain purchases. So the experience levels that we've had are hands-on, as well as the submission of it, as well as the explanation of the budget. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli?
My last position at the Sheriff's Office was Support Services Captain, and in that division falls the budget. And so I worked very closely with our administrative budget director for those last 5 or 6 years, and I had an opportunity to review a lot of the budget information. I was also responsible for our KIP plan, which develops a long-range planning for items of thousands of dollars, whether it's a truck or an item that isn't a yearly budget item. So I too am very familiar with it, and I have worked closely with those individuals that make some of the decisions. I work with the commander here during the same process, and to make the best possible decisions we can. We are so limited. There's not much wiggle room, as you say, because our funds do go for personnel and retirement dollars as well. So decisions have to be made wisely, and we have to be good stewards of our tax dollars for everybody included.
Mr. Knutson?
We touched on this just briefly earlier. One of the major aspects of my job is the development of that budget, starting in about May, and then it doesn't actually finish up until November when it's actually ratified by the county board. How that process works is we put out a request to the captains, who reach out to their sergeants to determine what sort of things might wish to be added to the budget. We get all of those requests, we put them together, we put it into a comprehensive package, and we sit down as captains and commander, and I walk through the budget and we talk about what needs to stay in, what do we need, and what do we want. Once it's built and we've gotten rid of the stuff that we think that we can get rid of, I take it to the sheriff and the chief deputy and the other commander. We sit down and we go through it a second time and call out the things that we can take out. I have had to present this just here the other day to the joint committees from the county board. Our budget for the correctional services side, Eric Chelvold, my counterpart on law enforcement services, presented on his side. Once it goes through there, I will take it to the county administrator, and that gets a very detailed scrubbing, and you really need to be on top of it as to why specifically we need anything in there, and then we'll end up taking it to the county board for the final resolution. I also deal with contract negotiations, and all of these things together fall largely under the commander level at the sheriff's office, with the captains providing input. Appreciate the input, but it is definitely a different level of responsibility there. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more time for one more question. And I really hate to end with this one, but before we do closing remarks, but how is Rock County prepared in the event of a mass shooting? This is Mr. Garelli first. Yes.
Well, the Sheriff's Office has worked extensively to some degree on training with other agencies within Rock County and gone over some scenarios. I haven't worked as a SWAT personnel. My plan as sheriff would be to, again, collaborate with more training. The accreditation process that I talked about earlier, that 4 other agencies within Rock County are already accredited. And if elected sheriff, that would be my #1 goal. And the reason for that, in conjunction with this question, is that if we're accredited along with the 4 other agencies within Rock County, we would understand training regards, how to respond. We'd be under the same policies and guidelines that we all have, and we would know each other extremely better. So in a situation would arise, we'd be better prepared. It also involves connecting to schools with that same training, the same program, so they understand the position they must take in conjunction with what we're trying to do. But again, the big piece of it is working together collectively, collaboratively with each other, understanding each other's role in a situation like that, and to benefit everybody involved as safely and as possible as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson.
I did serve on the SWAT team for 16 years as part of my assignment at the sheriff's office. When I finally left the SWAT team, I left as the commander of that team, and I left because I became the commander for law enforcement services, and in that position I make the determination whether the SWAT team can go or not. So I couldn't continue on the SWAT team at that point because my role became one step above that. I also was involved in the initial implementation of the Rescue Task Force, which is combining law enforcement services with fire and EMS services to get help into active shooter situation as quickly as we possibly can, to provide assistance to victims as quickly as possible. I have been involved with the security team at Evansville School District, as well as being a Parkview School Board member, and we have addressed problems with, or the potential of a school shooter issue over there by providing training for staff, and so that they understand what it is that they can do to best protect themselves should this situation happens before law enforcement can get there. Lastly, when I recently was reassigned to Court Services Division, one of the first things that I did was to assess our ability to respond to a serious situation down in the courthouse, and we provided additional training for officers immediately so that they knew exactly what was expected, and were all up to speed on how they were going to respond should we have a situation like that occur at the courthouse. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maurer?
Well, obviously, emergency management falls under the sheriff's office, and if you look at their emergency manual, that covers many different aspects. It's quite large, and obviously mass shootings is one of them. If you look at the recent mass shootings throughout the United States, SWAT doesn't mean an awful lot because a lot of people are dying within the first 30 seconds to a minute of the actual event. What is happening and who is stopping this is the frontline officers, the deputies that are out on the street. So how are we better prepared? Well, we've been training an awful lot. We've also equipped our deputies with better weaponry. And what I mean by that is through the 1033 program, we were able to go from shotguns only in the sidearm to AR-15 style weapons, semi-automatic, so that we can actually go against the threat at the same level. and hopefully even higher. We've also been able to get ballistic panels that are available in the squads, the supervisor squads. And what that does is it allows the initial responding deputies to actually go in and have a safer approach to the active shooter. We no longer wait outside. We learned that from Denver years ago. So in terms of how are we doing things differently, we don't want this to happen, but we're more prepared today than we were just a couple of years ago. And obviously we're better prepared today than we were 10 years ago. And unfortunately, our preparedness has come at the expense of others. So, in just a few years ago, I sat with Black Hawk Technical College, and we came up with a scenario in terms of an active shooter within BTC. So, we have practice, we've continued to practice. I have the experience in terms of how we should respond to these, and I believe we're well suited to do so, and hopefully we do not have to. Thank you.
Okay, we've come to the time of the forum in which we'll ask each candidate to give their closing remarks. Mr. Knutson, you are first.
Thank you. As I consider the office of the sheriff and the impact that it has on the community, I have to reflect back to about a week ago when I ended up being on the receiving end of one of these phone calls in the middle of the night, dealing with a traffic tragedy in my own family. And it really highlighted to me the importance of what law enforcement does out in the community. Certainly as you attempt to navigate something like this, which is very difficult for a family to have to go through, you learn exactly how important it is that law enforcement does things the way that they do it. In this particular situation, the person who was killed did not have a seatbelt on, it doesn't appear, and that's certainly a very tragic situation. As we enforce the law, a lot of times people will think that we do it to meet a quota, to make money for the agency, just to be bullies. I don't know, but I think part of being a sheriff is teaching people to do the right things for the right reasons. And in a case like that, a ticket, which would have been difficult to pay, would have been a great thing if it would have kept that person wearing a seatbelt that night. Another lesson that I learned that night is how we do our job is critically important. I had to make many calls as a result of this, talk to different agencies, different officers, and across the board I was treated with respect and compassion, and I truly appreciated the job that they did. And I think sometimes we can get busy on this job. Sometimes we deal with difficult issues day in and day out, but we really need somebody to keep us on track as to why it's important to maintain our compassion and maintain the right attitude as we try and do our jobs. One of the last things that I learned, I had to navigate getting veterans services there, and I didn't know what the phone numbers were, and I was very pleased to be able to contact our Honor Guard commander, and he was able to provide that. Some people would say that an Honor Guard is not needed, and perhaps we could save some money that way, but there are a lot of things that we do at the Sheriff's Office that may not specifically be needed, but which are critically important to the people in our communities. When I mentioned the mental illness and poverty and some of the issues such as that I think are something that I really need to focus on going forward. Some people felt that maybe that isn't a law enforcement issue, but I think it absolutely is. I think we are the first ones to arrive at some of those scenes, and I think the impact and the difference that we can make in those situations can make all the difference for those families. Maybe we can get them off of a bad track and onto a good track, and maybe we get them out of the criminal justice system. That's what I'm hoping to accomplish in the next 4 years as your sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer.
We've done a lot of good things in our community for many years. It's time that we start to focus internally. And what I mean by that is we need a more employee-focused or people-centered culture to ensure core values remain tangible and known within our ranks. Empowering and encourage employees at every level will increase their sense of pride, fellowship, and loyalty to the Sheriff's Office and to the community. Forming the Bureau professional standards will aid in this endeavor. I will walk the talk just like I've been doing for the last 23 years. I will make up and down communication to all staff members a priority by attending briefings to provide operational updates while seeking feedback to ensure frontline employees work in the most effective and efficient environment possible. Goals will be identified and prioritized until resolved. I will reestablish the position of lieutenant while eliminating many of the higher salaried captain positions through attrition. The many duties of shift sergeants limit their ability to lead, mentor, and supervise during calls of service. Having a lieutenant perform administrative duties at the shift level will allow our sergeants time to mentor and provide quality control. Establishing a robust career path for correctional officers to the rank of corporal is imperative. I will gladly work with union leadership to see this endeavor finally comes to fruition. And lastly, no politics, no entitlements, no controversies, just principled leadership. Thank you.
Mr. Garelli.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, and Justice for Borders for hosting this event tonight, and commend everybody that came tonight to help themselves be more informed about the issues, and the people that are watching at home or across the TV lines. I want to be your sheriff for a very simple reason. That's to make the sheriff's office better and the community better. And I mentioned earlier a couple things that I'm going to do. And in 2014, my platform was to fight the opioid and heroin problem that we had, that we could see coming. And unfortunately, we were correct. It's exploded in the last 4 years. So I've already reached out to Chief Moore, and we're going to work collectively again on their DROP program, which is a program that connects law enforcement officers with individuals that are arrested and sees them through the whole process. And at the end, they're a contact that they can have in a time of need. They also are a resource for them to find treatment and connect them to the people that they need to have as they re-enter the community and exit our jail. The accreditation process that I talked about, I think, is imperative. It's a very intense program, can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to institute in a law enforcement agency. There's only 42 out of approximately 525 law enforcement agencies in Wisconsin that are currently accredited, and this would be through the WE League organization. And as a community member, I think it's very important to you to understand that I would be doing everything in my power to make the sheriff's office as professional and as organized, policy-driven with the best standards that law enforcement has to offer across the country, and those would be incorporated within an accreditation. I'm committed to criminal justice reform, to finding answers for the rates of mass incarceration against the people of color, and I'm also very much convinced that a unified leadership with a servant-style leadership is necessary at the sheriff's office, and I can provide that with my 36 years of service and the partnerships that I built over those 36 years to bring that to the sheriff's office. Thank you.
I would like to thank the candidates for giving Rock County citizens a choice at the polls. All three candidates will be on the ballot on August 14th primary, and then 2 will face off in November. I'd like to thank the School District of Beloit for their facility and the media, for the Beloit and Janesville media members who are present this evening, for, again, the members of the co-sponsors, the League of Women Voters of Beloit and Janesville, JOB and NAACP. And I would encourage everyone to exercise their right to vote on August 14th, and thank you for attending or watching this, and that this video will be available on JATV 994, YouTube, and WADR 103.5. Thank you very much for coming.